We're rolling.
Ready?
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Welcome everyone to the Ask an Architect show. Here with me today, Carl Elefante. Carl, thank you for joining.
My pleasure.
Appreciate having you on the show.
Nice to be here.
Carl, can you kind of tell our audience real quick so they can get to know you a little bit, kind of 15, 20-second overview, who you are and what you're doing right now?
Sure. Well, for you architects out there, I'm the 2018 president-elect of AIA. I am a practicing architect. I work for Quinn Evans Architects here in Washington, D.C., with offices in Detroit, Ann Arbor, Baltimore, and Madison, Wisconsin.
Wow.
I'm the director of sustainability for the firm and a principal. So I do a lot of different project work, and I'm now in the middle of this rather strange sidebar, which is serving as AIA leadership.
Great. Well, I want to kind of get into several stages of your career and also talk a little bit about Quinn Evans. So let's just start there because that's where you are right now. What's the culture like at Quinn Evans? What is it like to be there? What kind of environment are you all trying to foster at Quinn Evans?
I'm totally fortunate to work in a firm where firm culture is such a focus of what we do. We're about 140 people today, and if you told me that 20 years ago that we would be 140 people, everybody in the room would have gone, "Oh no, we're not even interested in growing," and we'll lose that family feel or whatever.
Yep, sure.
It's kind of happened organically. I would describe it as we never said no to a project that we wanted to say yes to, and we never said no to a person that we wanted to say yes to in terms of having them come work with us. So it just sort of happened. The firm was established by Mike Quinn and Dave Evans as a historic preservation architecture firm.
Historic preservation.
And I would say that the focus there, which is somewhat unusual in the preservation field, is a real commitment to preservation as design. It's not something that's separate from mainstream architectural practice. It's a focus, but that it is architecture. It is design. It's not some other thing. And I think that that's, from a professional practice point of view, really sort of identified the character of the firm. And then the other side of it is the sort of family side, two guys who are architects, really wanting to create a firm that they felt personally responsible for and personally connected to, and that they would feel personally responsible and connected to every person that worked there. And there's a really strong sense of loyalty toward the people that work at Quinn Evans. And guess what? It results in a really strong level of loyalty from people that work at Quinn Evans toward the firm.
It's a good description.
It really is a place where I think you as an individual feel like there's an opportunity for you to belong there and not just work there.
That's a fantastic description. I love both angles you highlighted there. If somebody were to be working at Quinn Evans, you mentioned you have several locations, but I think that on the surface, they're kind of interesting locations. They're unique. They're not your typical big city in the big state. So, how has your expansion been driven into those cities? Is it by clients, by employees who wanted to work there? How did you guys get to all the cities that you're in today?
Well, all of the above.
Sure.
So Ann Arbor and Washington opened at the same day. That Mike Quinn was here in Washington working on a couple of fantastic projects as a consultant to Arthur Cotton Moore on the old post office pavilion and the Library of Congress. So he was here in town doing great projects. When they decided to open the firm, it was a pretty easy decision to not have him move back to Ann Arbor.
Sure.
Because he was here doing such great
work.
Yeah. And then, somewhat of an organic growth
into the other locations.
both into Detroit and then very recently into Baltimore.
That's interesting. Great. Well, thanks, Carl. I want to step back and not just talk a little about Quinn Evans, but I actually want to go back to the beginning of your career, because I think one of the great things about having a principal on the show is that you've gone through several stages of your career, and you can hopefully impart pieces of wisdom from those different stages. Early on, when you first started, when it was your first job or your first firm, what were some things that you observed that maybe you weren't that great at, but you knew you needed to get good at, or things that maybe you did wrong that you knew you needed to improve upon in order to really kind of ramp up and get better and escalate your career? What would you say from your early career?
Well, great questions.
Sure.
So I needed to get better at everything, and I made mistakes on everything.
Sure, that's good for people to hear.
Right. I split my schooling.
Okay.
Okay, and so I started at Pratt Institute out of high school, and I was one of those students. I was one of those people who, by the time I was in my early teens, I knew I wanted to be an architect.
Okay.
And going to the New York World's Fair, going there to sing at the New Jersey Pavilion, which is a whole other story.
Wow, that might be an entirely other episode.
But as a result of that, I went to the World's Fair maybe half a dozen times in the course of a year.
Okay.
And I found that I had this mental map of the whole complex. I knew what every one of the pavilions looked like.
Okay.
And I kind of walked away from that going, number one, oh wow, look at this cool futuristic architecture.
Sure.
But number two, it's like, wow, I am totally implanting this. This is something that my brain is really paying attention to.
Yeah.
So I went to architecture school after working as an office boy, and that was my title, office boy.
That is a very prestigious title,
right?
Carl.
Very prestigious. When I was in high school, I worked in a firm in Summit, New Jersey, and so went to architecture school. After 3 years of being in New York City, during the absolute 3 worst years you could possibly live in New York.
Okay.
Race riots, trash strikes,
Gotcha.
just really a very intense period. And I was just this kid from New Jersey. I just had to get out of there.
Okay.
I ended up through a whole series of circumstances that you don't have enough time for. There's not enough film in the camera. I ended up working for an architect in Memphis, Tennessee, Keith Hayes. And
wow.
Keith had just hung his shingle after having worked for years as a kind of a key designer for Walk Jones and Francis Maw. And I was literally his first and, for a long time, his only employee.
Okay. It's a big transition, New York to Memphis.
Yeah, big transition. The blues figures in there somewhere.
Okay, we'll roll with it.
Right. But so as Keith's sole employee, I really got thrown in the deep end of the pool. And by the way, I recommend it. Really get engaged.
Good advice, yep.
Day one. Just be curious, be engaged. And then after 3 years of working with Keith, I realized I had to get back to school. So I came to D.C. and came to the University of Maryland and finished my degree there.
Okay.
But early in that, by the way, actually not my first but my second job here in D.C., I worked for the D.C. office of Perkins and Will.
Okay, yep, still
and
here. Yeah.
Right when I got hired, Larry Perkins and Phil Will came to Washington to say goodbye because they were retiring.
They're leaving. Okay.
And there I was, the newest employee, and I literally walked up to them and said, I'm your newest employee.
Yeah.
Tell me about what makes great architecture. And Larry Perkins said, it's all about the people. Mm-hmm. And I was, kind of young, and I was in college, and I wanted an answer like, it's structure, it's solid and void, it's materiality.
100%, yeah.
Right. So the idea that it was the people was completely unacceptable answer to me at that point. And like 25 years later, all of a sudden it was like, it's the people.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Carl, because that's the people challenges and managing people, whether they're coworkers, clients, or your manager. It's a constant theme on the show in terms of that's really the key to being successful. Fitting in, having a good team culture, working with clients well, attracting clients. So I'm glad you brought that up. As you move from your younger career to middle stage, you got your license, you started managing people yourself. What were some of the skills at that point that you realized were really valuable? Again, you said that Larry Perkins mentioned, it's not the structure, it's not necessarily the design, it's people. What were some managerial strategies and tactics that you really found valuable once you got into that level of your career? Like, what works with people?
Well, I think there's really two things that are universal. Okay, one is that be a person to everybody.
Be relatable, authentic.
Just be who you are, and ask them to do the same. Okay. The second is have a purpose, and I think that this applies both in terms of what you do as an architect and having a mission as an architect, and then also I think it has to do with what you do as an architect working with other people on your building projects.
Sure.
So in the field, it's clear to me that the people who are successful architects that essentially sort of establish a place in the architectural profession, not just having a job in an architect's office,
Sure.
are people with a real mission, with a real sense of mission. Mike
sense.
Quinn and Dave Evans couldn't be better examples.
Yep, makes sense.
And then the other is that, in terms of really, having a purpose with what you do in your dealings with the people that you work with and the people that you're, working on your projects with. The only thing that you really need to be an effective leader is to have something you care about. And that projects. You can't pretend it.
Nope, it has to be authentic.
It has to be authentic. And when you care about something, when you have a real sense of purpose about it, then you know how to align things to that purpose, and the people around you know how to align to that purpose.
Yeah. What I love about that, Carl, is that those are skills that anybody can acquire or improve upon or learn through practice and through being exposed by situations, and they can acquire those types of traits over time. It's nothing that you need to go to school for 20 years and get a PhD in. It's just experience, and it's learning how people react to different things and how people are people and how to treat them, treating people well. So now you're in a principal position. You've been in this position for a while. You kind of the leadership role. What's the best part of being a principal? A lot of folks that we're talking to are aspiring to that role. They're going to work for several years, have long careers, and strive and strive and strive to achieve that principal title. But once you get there, what's so great about it? What do you enjoy?
Well, I think the thing that I enjoy is what we were just talking about. I enjoy,
the purpose,
having
the
a mission in the work that I do, and being able to provide leadership in that. That it is. I would say, leadership is the quality that's the inescapable quality. You must be able to provide leadership in order for you to be able to organize and motivate all the resources that it takes to do a building project. And even the simplest building project requires, alignment of dozens of people, if not hundreds and thousands, and resources that, frankly, your client's financial resources, it's always stretched. They're always nervous about it. It's something that you are building confidence with what you do in the people around you, and people make decisions based on how they feel.
Sure. People are emotional. They're not always rational. Right. Let's talk about those people around you. The younger folks coming out of school that you guys hire and that you work with. What do you find are the most successful traits among those folks? How can those people really position themselves to be successful at Quinn Evans or even the profession at large? What do you see are the most successful traits in those types of people?
I think we're at a really interesting point today in the profession.
Okay.
And
tell us more.
There's a whole lot of background to this that I'll skip in the interest of time.
Sure.
Just to say that with the disruption that's happening around us and it's happening in our profession, just kind of sitting at your desk and, drawing pictures of buildings, that's not the dynamic aspect of what we do. Okay.
Yep, I love it.
What is the dynamic aspect of what we do? What is really relevant and meaningful is, I will call it the social entrepreneurism of what
Social entrepreneurism.
So,
All right.
in other words,
Define that.
find issues in your communities, find issues with your clients that are real life impact issues for them, and understand what we can do with our design to have the impacts that they're looking for and that they need.
Yep.
And we can help find the resources. If we sit in the office and wait for the phone to ring, for somebody to call up and say,
Yep.
hey, I have a project for you, we are already 3 steps down the road from really being able to have as much impact as we could.
Makes sense.
And getting out of your chair, getting into your community, dealing with your clients, really understanding them as people,
Yep.
understanding how your design impacts their lives and their organization. That's being a social entrepreneur.
So it's not just about solving problems, it's going out and identifying the problems and coming up with solutions. Whether that's, a blank slate or working with a client or, when people call in or come by the office, whatever it is. I love that, Carl. Speaking of social entrepreneurism and kind of not only finding business opportunities for a firm, but improving yourself as a practitioner and moving yourself forward as a professional, what kinds of things do you do to make sure that you stay on the cutting edge of practice or management or leadership? How do you make sure that tomorrow you're a better Carl Elefante than you are today?
Well, in a lot of ways, I've really committed the last 20 years of my career as a sort of a principal level person trying to do that. And so that really started with getting involved with the topic. Okay, and that topic was bringing together sustainability, green building practices, and historic preservation, existing building practices, and coming up with the incredible line, the greenest building is the one that's already built, which is trying to really reflect the idea that these two fields actually reflect two sides of the same stewardship ethic that is really important in our field. So in essence, by getting involved with that issue, I got involved with projects, of course. I also got involved with that issue more broadly in the profession, within AIA and actually outside of AIA as well. And, it's a direct outgrowth of our firm, our focus on historic preservation. It's translating that relevance of the preservation focus to a new, very dynamic field, which was the sustainable green building world. And 15 or 20 years ago, if you walked into a sustainability conference, number one, good luck finding one.
Yeah, sure.
But 20 years ago, if you walked into there and said, "Oh, I work on existing buildings," everybody would say, "Why are you here then?"
Right.
That doesn't have anything to do with this topic. And so really, that it wasn't something instead of architecture. It wasn't something instead of what I was doing at work. It was recognizing the work that we were doing and how its significance was actually relatable to all these other things in the universe around us.
Gotcha. So finding that target passion, combining it together, and then constantly trying to improve and iterate on it and get better at whatever it is that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So Carl, let's leave on a little bit of a personal note. You're kind of a guy now coming up to be AIA president here that you're going to be out and about engaging and interacting with a lot of folks. If somebody sees you at a conference or at an event, what's a good topic to come up to Carl Elefante and chat about?
Number one, come say hi.
Come say hi. Okay.
I am officially on overload meeting new people.
Sure.
Don't expect me to remember your name. I ran out of remembering names about 2,000 people ago.
Yeah.
But I would really love to know what you love.
Sure. That's easy enough.
What your interests are. There's a place for you in the profession. There's a place for you in AIA to help the profession advance. That isn't for me to tell you what you're interested in and what I need to
Yeah.
have you do.
Sure.
It's to have me help facilitate you
Yeah.
in really understanding what you love and how what you love is relevant to the profession and relevant to our society and communities.
Well said, Carl. Well said. Well, Carl, thank you so much for being on the show today.
My pleasure,
Really
Nick.
appreciate it. I hope you guys got a lot of value out of this. We kind of went through Carl's career and dropped some nuggets of knowledge there, as well as provided some advice on life from Carl. So, Carl, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on the Ask an Architect show.